Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Peter, the head of an up-and-coming computer technology company. He was returning home after a hard day's work. Not everything was going smoothly at his company. Work crises had happened before. There had been ups, there had been downs, but there had never been anything like this. This was all he could think about. What had happened? Why was the firm losing orders and incurring huge losses? Never before had there been so many complaints about their goods, and all this did not give the man peace. Everyone has problems in life. Some solve them easily, and some people run away thinking it'll all work itself out. That's exactly what Cindy was sure of when she decided to run away from her common-law husband. Packing up her and her son's things in a hurry, she went, as they say, wherever the hell she wanted to go. Mommy's cool, we have to stand. Little Frank taught her, but the woman didn't seem to hear him. She was all absorbed in her own thoughts, somewhere very, very far away. All about the green, the boy exclaimed joyfully and pulled his mother by the hand. And she stepped out into the middle of the road and suddenly felt the ground go from under her feet. She did not let go of her son's hand and pulled the boy behind her as he fell. As she walked across the crosswalk, she caught the attention of Peter. Cindy was very tall and thin. He didn't really like that type of woman. And behind her dragged a huge black suitcase and a boy of kindergarten age, who chattered without a word, now and then looking at his mother. The boy is funny, very fast, with small legs, barely keeping up with the broad steps of his parents. And just at that moment, while Peter was watching the strange couple, the woman collapsed on the asphalt in the middle of the road. The boy sat beside her, crying, shaking his mother. Peter, without wasting a second, jumped out of the car and, lifting the woman in his arms, carried her to his car. Then he took the suitcase and the boy, and without thinking of anything better, he drove to his home. In situations like this, a decision had to be made very quickly. There was no time to think about it, so he immediately dialed the number of his friend, who was also the chief doctor of the city hospital number 3, and asked him to come to him immediately. "What is your name?" Loudly he addressed the frightened child. Looking in the rearview mirror, Frank Payne answered the boy. "And I'm Peter." "Well, or just Uncle Peter," smiling slightly, Peter replied. "What's your mom's name?" "Mom." "Cindy, and my dad's name is Lubbert." "Probably Robert," the man corrected the child, and he nodded in agreement. "I haven't learned to say that letter correctly yet, but my mom's teaching me." "I see. I couldn't say the letter R before either, but then I learned it. I think you'll be able to soon." He looked at the kid again in the rearview mirror and saw him agree, nodding back with a wide smile. "What about my mom?" the boy asked. "I don't know," shrugged Peter, "but I think it's nothing. Now my friend doctor will come and tell us everything." Sam, a therapist of the highest category, stopped in front of Peter's house almost at the same moment as the owner. Peter carried the stranger to the sofa, and the doctor began to examine, presented the dress. He noticed a huge bruise on the inside of the thigh. There were also bruises on the neck of the arms. Having finished his examination, Sam turned to his friend and said, "Beat, I think she was raped. We need to examine her at the clinic and take tests." "And why did it take her so long to come to her senses?" Peter asked. "She's conscious, but it's very difficult for her to open her eyes. Cindy, you can go on your own," the doctor addressed his patient. Instead of answering, the woman tried to get up from the couch, but at the very moment her feet touched the floor, and she tried to assume an upright position. Her head went round again, and she slumped back into her original position. By a common effort, the men managed to get the unfortunate woman into the doctor's car. Although the woman tried to resist, she was very worried about her son and wanted to take him with her. But Peter was able to assure her that the boy was perfectly safe. The woman's eyes were filled with fear. With her brain, she knew she shouldn't do this. It was wrong. But her strength was failing her. Entering back into the house, Peter saw Frank, who was sitting peacefully on the couch where his mother had recently lain. "I suggest a snack." The man smiled. "What do you like, Frank?" "What my mom cooks," the boy replied. "It is very tasty always." "I agree. Mom always cooks delicious. But you know what I'll tell you? A very kind aunt comes to me, and she also cooks very good. For example, today she made me potatoes, mashed potatoes, and cutlets. Let's try it." The child looked curiously into the frying pan and noisily sucked in air with his nose. "It smells good. Let's try it," he concluded, putting the food on. Peter noticed that the child was eating very carefully for his age and even knew how to use a knife. That was unusual. "Did Tho teach you that?" the man asked, pointing to the knife. "Daddy probably," answered the boy. "His name is Robert, and I told you before." Yeah, I remember." "So you're Frank. And how old are you, Frank?" The boy, carefully going through his food, put aside the cutlery and utensils and showed all 5 fingers on his right hand. Peter had never had to deal with such small children. He had not had time to have his own, despite the fact that he had long dreamed of a large and friendly family. But I guess it wasn't fate. Pay no attention to parental advice about his chosen one. He decided to get married at the age of 21. The young rented an apartment, and despite the fact that Peter worked a lot, money was catastrophically lacking. Or rather to say, the wife was always not enough. Always a dissatisfied expression on her face, bad mood, complaints. All this became so commonplace that it seemed impossible to be different. "You have to provide for me since you got married," she said once again. "Yes," I argue, "but it never occurred to you that it would be easier if the two of us worked together for the good of the family." "What do you mean?" There was a look of genuine incomprehension in the young wife's eyes. "Well, for example, to find a job and together with me to supplement the family budget." "Are you serious?" The wife laughed. "Did I get married for that? And for what do you want to know?" "To live the way I want to live at my own pleasure. And certainly plow like a horse from morning to night for a penny. I certainly wasn't going to." Those words were the last straw in the cup of his patience. Peter smiled sadly and said, "Well, my dear, I will give you this opportunity. From this day you can live as you wish." With these words, he took his things and left the rented accommodation forever. For 6 months, his wife did not give Peter a pass. She followed him around and begged him to come back. But the man was enough 2 years of life together to realize how right his parents were at the time. When Peter opened his own business, the wife again appeared on the horizon. Her instincts never failed her. "Peter, but not stupid. Well, let's try to start over. I believe we can make it work this time. I thought about a lot of things and I realized I was wrong. I believe that everything will work out for us too," grinned Peter. "Everything will work out, but not with each other." Cindy spent about a week in the hospital. Sam brought her cell phone, and she was able to call her son daily. She could see that he was cheerful and healthy. "I don't even know how to thank you, Peter," she read into the phone. "Oh, come on, Cindy," the man waved her off. "I'm very glad I could be of service to you. You have a beautiful little boy. And by the way, he's preparing a surprise for your discharge," she cried, unable to find the right words. Gratitude overwhelmed her with gratitude. Peter arranged for Frank to go to kindergarten. In the morning, he would drop the boy off, and in the evening, he would pick him up either by himself or trusted his neighbor Jenna, who lived next door to his daughter's family. Despite the fact that Cindy saw her son every day, bad thoughts did not give her peace. She chased them away, but it did not work well. "Think good thoughts," Cindy told herself. "Do you need your strength? You need to recover and get back to Frank." The fact that Peter had come into her life, she considered it a good sign. It had changed the way she thought about people. During her time at her husband's house, the woman had finally stopped believing in goodness. The clock struck 12. This is the last night in the institution. Tomorrow she'll be discharged and meet her son. Cindy couldn't sleep. Emotions were overwhelming. She also realized that the discharge would add a lot of problems to her life. First of all, it was necessary to solve the housing issue, then to look for a job at Frank kindergarten. He was now attending preschool, but Cindy did not know under what conditions he had been accepted there. Maybe it was temporary. In short, there were so many questions, and all unanswered, but she could handle it for her son's sake. In the end, he took her into his tender arms. It was only in the morning that she awoke to the slamming of a door. That young nurse had entered the room to give her last injection of the morning. Cindy was greeted from the clinic by Peter and Frank. The boy was carrying a bouquet of flowers, and it was obvious that he was trying hard not to drop it. "Is this for your mom?" the boy said as Cindy ran up to him. "I've missed you so much." "I missed you, too, sweetheart. And Uncle Peter taught me a few things." And the boy, smiling, squinted slyly and said, "Listen, robot, rocket radio." Peter stood a little farther away and smiled, watching their meeting. He clearly liked these people. "Thank you, Peter, for everything you've done for us." She thanked the man as she came closer. "I'm glad I could help. What do you plan to do next?" "But first we need to find a hotel." Cindy shared her thoughts. "We need a place to stay until I can find us an apartment. And we need to look for a job. The only other thing I'd like to ask you is if you don't mind if we pick up our things later." The man frowned. "No, that won't do. Let's do it another way. The apartment, the job. But all this time you live, I've got a big place, plenty of room for everyone. We don't need to take the kid to hotels, especially when he has to go to kindergarten tomorrow. The teachers there praise him. And a friend is waiting." "Son," Cindy gave me a playfully surprised look. "You have a girlfriend?" "Of course," nodded the boy. "Uncle Peter told me that a man should be independent and reliable." "Yes." Well, you and I will discuss it more later." The mother's son walked up to the mother and took her hand. "Let's go home." The table was already set. The boy could see that he felt like a fish in water. He knew where everything was. Dinner. Frank fell asleep, pressed against his mother, and she carefully carried him to the bed. "It's all right. Cindy, how are you feeling?" inquired Peter when she returned to the living room. "Just fine, wonderful," Cindy replied. A lively hair came in. "What do you think of the surprise?" Frank practiced growling every day. He was so anxious to learn to say the letter R in time for your discharge. "That's the first time I've ever seen a kid that persistent." "It was a surprise, really. I was expecting anything but that," the woman smiled. "Thank you again, Peter. I wanted to ask you something. How did you get Frank into daycare so quickly?" "I just know it's not easy." "It's really nothing." Peter laughed. "Jenna, my neighbor, helped. Her daughter is in charge of it." There was silence, and Cindy was the first to break it. "You probably want to know how I got to this life," she smiled. "Of course, I realize you must know about the people you've taken in. But it's a very long story. I don't know if we can do it in one evening. But that means you'll have to stick around." The man smiled, showing that he was ready to listen. "One more thing. Let's switch to you. If you don't mind, of course." "No, I don't mind." The woman smiled. "I was born and raised in the village high from childhood. And at school, I was always teased by the firemen's kalancha. Boys were shy to be friends with me because they were much shorter than me, and I was always upset about it. But my grandmother always calmed me down. I'm a grandmother. I'll never marry like that. Who would want someone like that? Honey," she used to tell me, "don't be in a hurry. The right time will come and your man will find you." I believed my grandmother. And when I met Frank's father, Robert, I immediately realized that this is exactly what Grandma had prophesied. My man really found me on his own. After high school, I went to the city and entered a 3-story college on the modeling designer. I really wanted to model my own clothes. After all, at my height, especially, nothing cannot pick up. And in college, all the girls told me that I am the road to modeling. I listened to their opinion, and after graduating, went to Conquer Lay, casting passed the first time, and began a career as a model. That's where my man found me. He literally wouldn't let me out of his sight. He's 12 years older than me. Expensive, fashionable, and tasteful in his clothes. But I was afraid of him. He looked like a gangster, and he had a gangster's attitude. I'm not talking about the kind of guy who would stab someone in a back alley with a $10 knife. No, I'm talking about what they call businessmen now. He had a temper, to say the least. Nobody wanted to get in Robert's way. I did a couple times. That's why I was afraid. He never asked me to marry him. But at the same time, I was on his full support. And when Frank was born, he was overjoyed. I watched it all happen and believed that this was the ticket to life. And then I realized how it could all turn out, so to speak. And a few times I even thought about leaving him. But when I remembered my former life without money with debts, then these thoughts went away by themselves. My friend told me repeatedly that Cindy was stupid. You can't even imagine how many girls dream of being in your place. A man like you has a crush on you, and you want a baby. And you turn your nose up at him. What do you want? Remember one simple truth. Your beauty and youth is a temporary phenomenon, and you don't even realize how fast it is here. Don't rush into the divorce squad, especially with a kid. You really think you're gonna find someone with a little extra? Not every man needs another man's kid. Listening to those words, I kept putting off leaving. But what he did next was the last straw. Did he rape you? Peter asked. And then he bit his tongue because Cindy clenched. Her hands began to tremble, but his answer was silence. She stared at him with frightened eyes, then gripped the mug of tea with her fingers to stop the trembling. She opened her mouth several times, about to say something, but closed it again before she could make up her mind. I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have asked. Just knowing that, despite what you're about to tell me, I won't run away and kick you out, and I'll help in any way I can. You're perfectly safe here with me, because only someone I allow to enter my house. None of us are immune to violence, but only the last man would raise his hand against a woman. I guess I've always been out of the world. Cindy began her story again. I've always believed that a man should not only be strong, but he should have heart. He should be romantic and take the first initiative in everything. But modernity dictates its own rules. Today, it is not fashionable to invite on a date to the movies, to walk in the park, and treat ice cream. Everyone and at once need only one thing. She was silent again for a moment and looked at Peter. With many of her statements, he was in complete agreement. He could see how nervous she was, and it was understandable. Now he looked at her with different eyes, and she was indeed taller than average. But the thinness wasn't reflected in her face. It was the right shape. Thick but nicely shaped eyebrows. Cute freckles that would probably drive any man crazy. Blue eyes. A nose like Frank's with slightly upturned, plump lips. And best of all, her own without a drop of silicone. She had her long brown hair in a bun at the back of her head. Yeah, not beautiful, but very pretty. And as it seemed to him, not a silly girl at all. Then we had a fashion show at the fashion house. Cindy continued, pulling Peter out of his thoughts. Robert came too. There were a lot of people, all beautifully dressed in smart suits. The champagne never seemed to end. The orchestra was playing loudly. Laughter was everywhere. I was surprisingly calm. I guess I didn't quite realize at the time the level of responsibility the management had placed on us. But as I expected, everything went off without a hitch. All of us then, I remember, gave a decent bonus, and I immediately bought myself expensive Italian winter boots. They were insanely beautiful and just as insanely expensive. That's when I noticed an attractive man in the front row who kept a predatory eye on me. And when he met me at the exit after the show, I was really excited. He offered, or should I say, even ordered me to get into his car. Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you. When I saw the car, I realized that it was more like a tank. He is, apparently, accustomed to this kind of relationship. Everything is concrete, fast, and most importantly, fail-safe. But it didn't suit me at all. I'm not interested in your proposals. I spend time with men I don't know. And for the future, don't poke me. You and I don't even know each other. From surprise, his eyebrows slowly crept upward, and I, taking advantage of his interference, threw a friend who had just pulled up in the car. But as it turned out, he wasn't going to give up. Refused today to agree to tomorrow. At the next show, I saw him again and again in the front row. I must say that from that day, he visited the fashion house with enviable constancy. The desire to possess this girl turned a solid man into a horny teenager, and soon he changed tactics. Once, coming out after the show, she saw him again, but already with a huge bouquet of flowers. The man approached and handed her the flowers and introduced himself as Robert. "Cindy," she replied, accepting the beautiful bouquet. "I know," the man said. "I know all about you, and I would like to invite you to the restaurant." I was really hungry at the time, so I agreed to go home. He brought me back quite late, and the next day he invited me to a restaurant again, but to a different one. This time I declined, offering him an alternative. "Robert, I'm full tonight, but I'd love to go for a walk in the park and have a cup of ice cream." He loved the idea, and finally I could admire the evening of Los Angeles. We walked for a long time. From then on, we saw each other a lot. And 6 months later, he invited me back to his place. Of course, I knew how that visit might end, but let me remind you that I sincerely believed that Robert was my man, and that he was my happiness. Soon I moved in with him. But after the first month together, I realized he was putting a lot of pressure on me. "Cindy, I don't want you to work. I don't want everyone preying on my spouse. We have enough money, so have fun. Pool, fitness, shopping. What else do rich businessmen's wives do? You want me to do nothing," Cindy clarified, but I wouldn't call it that. His eyes sparkled. And then, with a kind of anger I remember, I felt a chill inside me. But I decided not to give up. "I don't want to be a stone around your neck. I love what I do." And that wasn't the deal. To begin with, you're not my husband, and I'm not your wife. That was the day he freaked out and left with a loud slam on the door. I quickly collected the thing. It took me 15 minutes and went back to my apartment, but I didn't have time to give it up. And the next day, coming to the show in the front row, I saw a frowning Robert with a bouquet of flowers. I tried not to look at him then. I went home through the back exit, and when he showed up at the door of my rented apartment, I didn't open the door. Thank God, the fashion house season was coming to an end, and it was vacation time. I found another apartment, of course, worse than the previous one. But I had no other choice. Robert wasn't going to leave me alone. I even changed my phone number. I decided to disappear from his life completely. But all those actions only worked for 3 weeks. I underestimated him. He pulled all his connections. And then one morning, when I came out of the driveway, I saw him holding a bouquet. "Cindy, please forgive me. I didn't realize what I was doing out of jealousy. My mind must have been tortured. You're too beautiful with everyone staring at you." And I'm freaking out. "Well, then we should just break up, Robert. I'm not quitting my job, but I don't want to fight with you about it all the time. Let's just be friends. But I don't want to be friends with you. I want to live with you. I want you back in my house." "What are you talking about, Robert?" I demand. I'm going crazy. You're just talking about yourself again. Do you take my desires into account? Or do you think they can't exist? I think you're too selfish." Pain, Robert. This time I left. I didn't realize that he wouldn't give up so easily. His attempts to look for a new apartment didn't make any sense. He'd get me from under the ground anyway. So I made the decision to leave the house less frequently, only as a last resort. Every morning, looking out the window, I saw his car in the driveway. It's close. What am I gonna do? He won't let me get away with anything. I complained to my friend at the time. "So come to my place," she said. "But as his car all day long, I am guarded at home. I just can't get out." "But at night he is not there," smiled her friend. "As soon as it gets dark, call a cab and come to my place. That's what we did. I stayed with her for 2 weeks, and it was a real paradise. I haven't felt so relaxed in a long time. But the vacation came to its logical conclusion, and on my first day at work, I saw Robert in the front row in his usual seat. "Cindy, your handsome man is on duty." The girls giggled. I could see the envy in their eyes. Each wanted to be in my shoes, but they just didn't know the other side of the coin. They only saw what they wanted to see. "Stupid Cindy, he's your destiny. You can't escape your destiny. You're just messing with the man for nothing. Forgive him. It's already clear he loves you." After work, I knew he was waiting for me at the gate, so I didn't try to run anymore. How long could I run? "Sir D, I agree to live with you, but on one condition: I stay working at my place, and no pressure from that side, so that no more." "I agree. I agree to everything." He blurted out, not hiding his joy. And after the move, a very strange thing happened. I got pregnant. Why confusing? Because I was on the pill that was supposed to protect me from it. A baby wasn't part of my plan. I don't have my own place. I was living in Robert's house on a bird's license. He was in no hurry to get married. And then there was a baby. When I went to the gynecologist who had prescribed these pills to me, he was very surprised that what I had prescribed to you was the most reliable on the market today. "Maybe you were skipping them at the time." "Yeah, I agree. Couldn't have malfunctioned." He twirled the jar in his hands, and when he looked inside, he said, "Wait, those aren't the pills I prescribed." He said, "What do you mean?" "I bought them myself in the pharmacy on your prescription." I didn't quite understand the meaning of his words. "Yes, a jar of them. And inside they look like the ones I prescribed. But they're not. They're simple vitamins at best. Someone else had access to them besides you. If you'd like to keep these pills, I'll give them to the lab." I later found out that Robert had replaced my pills with vitamins. I felt cheated again. Robert, but do you have to be so sneaky just to tie me down? Are you thinking about yourself again? And I almost believe you, that you changed for the better. God, this is awful. How can you live with someone you don't trust an ounce? And if you get tired of me tomorrow, I'll be on the street with the baby. Thank God. At least this time he didn't lie and get away with it. He confessed right away and said it was the only chance he had to get me to stop. Thus, an episode of my life called The Taming of the Shrew came to an end. The pregnancy was fine. My thinness and height saved me, and I was able to work for a few more months. Robert was angry, but he kept quiet. And then Frank was born, my pride, my joy, my sweet son. Absolutely everything in my life had changed except one thing. I still didn't have the status of a legal wife. Robert was happy with that state of affairs. He loved his son more than life and did absolutely everything for him. I was at home with the baby, never going out. I had no reason to leave the house. Robert bought absolutely everything I needed, and I could walk on the territory. It was huge and carefully guarded. That's when I realized what it meant to live in a golden cage. When Frank was 3.5 years old, I started talking about going back to work again. "What about Frank?" Robert was surprised at the time. "You're going to carry him around with you." "But why can't I hire him?" "We're not the first. We're not the last." "No," he said flatly. Then we had our first big fight when I told him he was a tyrant and wouldn't let me out of the house, not even to see my friends. Robert hit me, smashed my lip from my nose. Blood was pouring out. "You want to see your friends? Go, I'm not keeping you." And he left. He wasn't home all night. Where'd he go? I don't know. Maybe he went to the casino. Maybe he went out with women. I don't know. But to be honest, I didn't really care. I spent half the night with ice on my cheek, but it was still a huge hematoma. I couldn't go to work. When I called the fashion house and asked how long they could keep my place, I learned that I had 6 months. But even then, they made concessions to me, taking into account my previous merits. The other one wouldn't have waited a month longer. My height and figure saved me. And I looked at my watch. It was well past midnight. Peter, I'm very tired. Let's continue. We'll leave it till tomorrow. By the way, your house is guarded. No one can just walk in here. Don't worry, and the guards are on duty. I've already given him all the orders he needs. They won't open the door. Sleep well. I will. And thank you again. She fell asleep with her little son in her arms. When she woke up to find the house empty. God, how embarrassing is this? Whispered the woman sits up on the bed. I slept through everything. And a stranger is taking care of my child. Going downstairs, she saw a nice middle-aged woman. She was standing at the stove in a beautiful apron, cooking something that I met with a mind-blowing aroma. Cindy's stomach immediately churned, and the woman turned to her, and it didn't seem like her body was overreacting to all those odors. Good morning. Such a fragrance that one simply cannot remain indifferent. Cindy smiled modestly. Your son tells me the same thing, smiled the woman. True, I have long suspected that he will grow up to be a ladies' man. You have a very nice boy. Sit down, Cindy, for breakfast and lunch won't be for another 3 hours. And Peter said he wouldn't be back until after dinner, so he'll be home at 6 p.m. Having finished breakfast, Cindy decided to look around the house. On the first floor was a huge living room, kitchen, Peter's study, several utility rooms, and servants' quarters. On the second floor was the master bedroom, several guest rooms, a gym, and a small room that was hastily furnished with various toys. It was a playroom, my eyes, and filled with tears of gratitude for this man. I must be lucky, whispered Cindy. Despite all the difficulties, met a man like Peter. She opened the door to his office ajar and stuck her head inside. There was a wide table by the window. Behind it was a huge leather armchair, probably very comfortable. A large number of books were neatly arranged on shelves, and there were flowers all over the study and potted violets, all blooming. It was marvelous. She immediately remembered her grandmother's words, "A flower will never bloom where it doesn't like it." Smiling, Cindy closed the study door and returned to her bedroom. She decided to lie down, woke up by someone insistently shaking her hand, opened her eyes. But the woman convinced Frank. "Sonny, who did you come with?" Cindy wondered, wiping her eyes. "With Jenna. She's very nice and often takes me out of kindergarten." He climbed onto the sofa and sat down next to his mother. "I missed you so much. Mom, did you have a bad time with Uncle Jack?" Cindy wondered. "No, he was fun and interesting. But it was you I missed. You eat my gold." She hugged her son. "I missed you a lot too, but the doctors wouldn't let me go until the treatment was over." They had dinner without Peter. He didn't come despite his promises that evening. They never waited for him and went to bed. The man had too many problems at the firm that required his presence. The security service did not sit idle, and again checked where the information could go. And more importantly, from whom. For tomorrow, Peter allowed the employees to go to work for lunch, referring to the fact that the cafe, located on the first floor, will be held processing, and he himself, together with the security service, controlled the installation of CCTV cameras. This took almost the whole night. Peter was proud of his security service. It wasn't some bumpkin or bouncer. No, they were really smart guys who could be relied on. And in 3 days, the head of the security service brought Peter a flash drive with all the information he was interested in. When Peter found out who had leaked the data, he was furious. As you'd expect, it was the one he trusted the most. Okay, let's say Chris leaked all the information, but why would he turn his back on us? Our biggest customer, Tuck Payne, made it clear to Cramola that we were cheap, working on 2 fronts. Back home, I need more information on this Payne guy. We keep the cameras on a permanent basis. As practice has shown, they're useful. I want Chris in my office tomorrow, as soon as he reports for work, to look into his shameless eyes and find out what he's been missing. That day, he came home again at midnight. Everyone was asleep. The house was silent. Peter quietly took a shower and went straight to bed. At 7 o'clock, he woke up to someone sitting on his bed. He opened his eyes. The man saw Frank. "Hi," Peter said quietly. "Hi," smiled the boy. "We're going to daycare today. Do you want to?" "But to be honest, I don't want to go today. I want to stay with my mom." "Well then, let's do it. It's Friday, so you'll be with your mom tomorrow, and the day after that. That's how long you'll be together. You're a brother." "Very much. Thank you, Uncle Peter." The boy put his little arms around the man's neck and blinked his cheek, and then he ran off contentedly to his room. It was an incredible feeling. Never had he experienced such feelings. Inside, everything turned upside down with delight at the contact with his palms. He let something very warm and important into his heart. At some moment, Peter even wanted to press him to his chest, to feel that childlike sincerity and see his smile. Without two front teeth. Getting old. "I must be," he said to himself. Even the embrace of a child brings a tear to his eye. Old people are sentimental. Peter smiled. And then he remembered that he had an appointment with that vile traitor Chris. He quickly packed up and rushed off to work. Frank was over the moon that he could spend the whole day with his mother. "Mom, you're the best." He couldn't stop talking. "You're the best too, my little boy." She hugged him back. After finishing breakfast, they went to the playroom where they read and played, then went for a walk. And after lunch, the baby slept, as they say, without back legs, and it was, taking advantage of the free time, decided to call Lisa. "Hi, Lisa. How's it going?" "I'm fine." Lisa sounded genuinely happy to hear from her friend. "How are you doing? Work? Soon. How's it going in there?" "Oh, we're still getting new recruits." "No, your place is waiting for you, just like your pretty boy." New girl bought something. Lisa was always interested in one thing. She was convinced that the most important thing in life is the man who's with you. He should provide his woman entirely and completely solve all her problems. Lisa, however, has not managed to find such a man, but she did not give up, and every time again and again desperately threw herself into the battle. She visited the most luxurious restaurants, prestigious exhibitions. It was there, in her opinion, was the best chance to meet a wealthy man, and age was not important to her at all. Cindy, unlike her friend, always counted only on herself in life. She began to live independently early and understood that she would help you in life. She was the only one who learned on her own, solved her own problems. She never relied on anyone, and certainly not on men. She always took relationships seriously and more often ignored all the signs of attention. She waited because she truly believed her grandmother's words that her husband would find her on his own. "And you are definitely doing well?" Lisa inquired unexpectedly, which made Cindy wary. "Yes. Why did you ask that all of a sudden?" "But it's just that your handsome man recently came to our fashion house with his eyes bulging, shouting like a madman looking for you to the bosses." "What did they talk about?" "I don't really know, but I heard rumors that he's looking for his wife and child, that they're missing. That's why I'm asking. I'm curious. How did it end?" "I don't know. After talking to his superiors, he left. Whether or not he knew your whereabouts, I wasn't informed." "Where are you really?" "Why don't I come to your house and talk to you?" "No, that's not necessary," Cindy said. "Don't you trust me, girlfriend?" "Liz, no offense, but it's what's best for everyone. And I'll call you again." As she hung up the phone and worried beyond belief, she was already regretting her action. She shouldn't have called anyone. "Well, where is she?" Robert asked Lisa when she hung up the phone. He had been standing behind her back during the whole conversation, afraid to breathe so as not to reveal his presence. He had promised Lisa $100 for calling her friend, and she was about to dial her number. Cindy called herself. "I don't know," she didn't say. "You must have really hurt her if she doesn't even trust me now, huh? Oh, why are you so upset?" She began to calm him down, noticing how the expression on the man's face changed. Such men are not abandoned. "If you want, we can go out and have some fun. Your Cindy will be back. Where's she going to go? Cindy came very close to the man, close enough to smell his perfume. She gently adjusted his tie and ran her palm over his unshaven cheeks. You're as prickly as a hedgehog. So what's up? Where are we going? Nowhere, Robert grumbled, stepping away from the girl. Maybe next time. And tossed a couple of $5,000 bills on the table, left the fashion house, and Lisa grimaced. She had liked Robert instantly as soon as she saw him. And why had she paid attention to Cindy? What did he see in her? No face, no skin. She had a nice figure, but that's all she had going for her. Those horrible freckles alone, which makeup artists always cover up. And they like the earrings. How do you figure out what's right for this man? It's probably wrong that I think that way about my friend, Lisa reasoned. But it's not my fault that Robert is so handsome. He provokes me with his appearance alone. And his perfume can drive anyone crazy. I was already holding myself back from the last of my strength. But if he touches me, I'm not responsible for myself. I'm powerless in front of him. I'm a human being. Lisa justified herself. Today, Peter's workday did not start well. First of all, he had not slept much. And secondly, Chris was waiting for him in front of his office. Looking into his shameless eyes, Peter frowned even more. They were red. You were giving a sleepless night. Chris had indeed come to work straight from the casino. Peter tried not to make eye contact. Maybe his conscience wasn't all gone yet. Maybe he was really ashamed of his behavior. After all, it was Peter who had once hired him. He taught him everything, and for years he considered him a loyal friend. But one day, Chris lost a very large sum of money. The guy was not only an excellent programmer, but also a talented mathematician. He was able to develop an algorithm, how to win at the casino. Of course, it was not immediately. For almost a year, he wrote, checked, corrected. But the result exceeded all expectations. The program did not let him down. For a long time, he was able to buy a prestigious car. An apartment not in the center of Los Angeles, of course, but his own. And after waiting for some time after a few wins, he again visited the casino to make the changed algorithms in his program and again became a regular at such places, and always on a roll. And soon the casino workers took notice of him. He tried not to abuse his luck, but noticed the evil, envious looks in his direction and decided to lay low for 3 months. The money was more than enough. Chris changed the apartment to a more comfortable, went regularly on vacation abroad. Even the head of Ford, Peter, could not afford such a luxurious life, which he led as an ordinary programmer. When his friends asked him where such riches came from, he just smiled modestly and said the same thing. Pure luck. But one day, when Chris came out of the casino with his next winnings, they threw a strap around his neck from behind. He sat there, grabbed the rope with his hands and pulled it off as hard as he could while he had enough strength. But soon they ran out and his arms hung along the soft body. Only then was the grip loosened. He was dragged around the corner and patted on the cheeks, brought to his senses. Let's talk. He heard an unfamiliar voice. He nodded and the stranger said, looking away, take him to the car. We don't need any unnecessary eyes. In the car, he was offered water. He took the bottle, drank more than half of it, wiped his mouth with his hand, and only then looked at his interlocutor. But the face was unfamiliar. He woke up. Chris nodded again. Well, let's get acquainted. My name is Robert. You're Chris, right? He just nodded. Well, there's no point in denying. I tell you right away I know everything about you. So to speak, I've been watching you for a long time. I see how you are led to the casino, and we both realize it's more than luck. So tell me. I have nothing to tell you. Chris was stubborn. You won't understand all my calculations, and I can't explain it. Do you play blackjack or poker? Asked Robert, interested. I play all of them. I'm interested in where and how accurately my algorithms work. You're not bluffing. Chris didn't feel the need to answer his question. For some reason, he looked at the man, who was listening to him with genuine interest, and he felt exceptional. Let's put it this way. he suggested. "I will tell you what to bet on, and myself on this day from the game will refrain from playing. But I warn you right away that I won't stand behind your back for the rest of my life. We'll talk about the terms on shore." "Okay," Robert agreed. "A month." No. You don't want to show up at the casino that often. We'll attract too much attention. 3 times I'll go with you." 5, Robert exclaimed. 5 times and no less. Chris agreed. 5 times and I'll never see you again. And don't come to me again. Especially not with that lanyard. Deal. That first night at the casino, Robert was at a crossroads. He didn't know whether to choose roulette or poker, and he settled on roulette. The bets were placed, and the game began. Robert smiled victoriously and could not stop being happy about his luck. Today was clearly his day. Chris stood behind him and whispered in his ear. The roulette partners were not happy and did not hide it. Some of them just left, and some of them lost the last ones, hoping to win back. But that's enough for today, Robert. One must know how to stop in time. The man did not argue and collected the winning chips, headed straight to the cashier's office. Having received a huge winnings, he left the entertainment center. Chris was glad that the new algorithms again did not let him down. But the next day, Robert called Chris again. "Robert, do you really think I don't have other things to do? I can't go to the casino every day. When do you have time?" "I'll call you myself." And he hung up. Pain was out of control. He was angry all the time, and he took it out on everyone. Mostly he took his frustration out on Ina, yelling at her over anything, over glass, considering her guilty of all mortal sins. Only in a week and a half Chris called Robert and appointed another meeting in the casino. But for some unknown reason, the algorithms didn't work this time, and Robert lost in a landslide. "You're gonna pay me back every dime," he hissed in the car. He was incredibly angry, but Chris was undeterred. "I don't owe you anything. You think I haven't had a misfire. The algorithms work, but none of them are 100% accurate." And indeed, the next time they met, everything was back on track. Robert won so much that the casino administration offered to pay out the winnings in installments. Since the winnings exceeded the maximum amount they could pay out in one day, Chris' intuition told him to stay away from this Robert. But greed, drowning out his voice of reason, he didn't make it back to the casino until 2 weeks later. Robert was incredibly angry, called every day, but Chris was too busy at work. The 3rd and 4th times were so unsuccessful that in a fit of rage, Robert beat up his partner. Chris then had to lie at work that he needed to visit his parents and take a vacation at his own expense. Until the bruises came together, Robert couldn't calm down. He billed Chris, but the latter, naturally, had no such money. The last 5th trip to the casino was so meager that it couldn't even lift Robert's mood. In fact, it probably did the opposite. "When will you pay back the debt?" he asked Chris. "I don't have that kind of money." "Find some. Sell the car, at least." "Why would I do that? I warned you it's not 100%. There are risks in everything, and I had nothing to do with it." "I see you've become fearless." Robert was getting pissed off. "Aren't you afraid you won't make it to the office?" Chris was scared, of course, but he tried not to show it. He tried to collect at least some of that debt, but it didn't work. "I can forgive you some of the debt." Robert called him one day. "It's a very lucrative offer for you. You have to get me the details of the order you made for Chris. Is your company actively cooperating with him?" "Of course, not the whole debt, but a decent amount. And if we cooperate in the future, you'll be debt-free." "Why do you need this information?" "Surprise, Chris. You don't realize it yourself. There are too many of us on the market. It's time to dump some of us. And here is such an opportunity." Chris spent the whole evening thinking about Payne's proposal, but then he decided that his own shirt was closer to his body. Peter had been in trouble with the company ever since, and now Chris stood at the director's door and thought hard about what to say for himself. Of course, he did not have enough conscience to tell Peter about his shirt. After all, Peter had done a lot of good for him in his time. Looking at Chris, Peter realized that he could never trust this man again and certainly would not leave him to work here. Peter asked himself over and over again how he could be friends with him. That running gaze, the crispness of his knuckles, the pale complexion, and the lying look. He was soaked in lies. He didn't like Chris. There were a lot of questions for him, and the most important one was, why was he a traitor? Rising from the doorstep, Chris started first. "Peter, why don't I write my own letter of resignation?" "Yes, of course you will. You can be sure you will. And don't give me that look of forgiveness and sympathy. And people like you don't deserve it. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. There are always choices. You just have to think and search, not take the easy and simplest path. Now tell me who you leaked what to and why you leaked it. Because you want my advice not to mess with it. Payne. He's crazy. Come on. I'll handle it, you tell me. Time." When Chris finished his narrative, Peter concluded that he was not lying and was sincerely sorry for what he had done. But he decided to keep his conclusions to himself for the time being. So said Peter after a little silence, "What you created and then sold to Payne, you have to fix on your own. Peter, how about you give him back his advance payment and refuse this order and any further cooperation with him?" How unexpected a suggestion is that? Peter grinned. "Or maybe it would be better if I stopped cooperating with you on behalf of you to return all the money I paid you for the work all this time. What do you think? I can tell it's not great. So here's the deal. You call the young man soon and say that you have developed a much better option than the one you offered him earlier and are ready to discuss the details. But I haven't thought of anything." Chris looked at him in surprise. "That's right. This is your chance to correct the mistake you made. You have a week to do everything. After that, you write your resignation, and we'll never meet again." The week was coming to an end, but the situation was never fixed. Nothing interesting came into Chris's head. And on Friday night, Peter called him into his office. "How's it going?" "It's fine. There are a couple of details that need to be finalized. I'll have a progress report on Monday." "Something interesting?" "I don't know." Chris smiled modestly. "You'll decide on Monday." After work, Peter went to the toy store, chose a new constructor for Frank in the supermarket, bought a cake, candy, and a bottle of good cognac, and he ran home as fast as he could. Frank greeted him like his own father, and it was a pleasure. After that evening, he and Cindy had never had a chance to continue the story. Tonight, however, he hoped that before the weekend, they could sit together longer and she could finish her story. Now Cindy stood back and watched with a smile on her lips as Frank greeted Peter and peered curiously into the grocery bag. She marveled at the relationship between this man and her son. After all, Frank was terrified of his father, but he was drawn to this man with all his soul. Robert always made it a point to raise him to be a man. Without kissing him or hugging him, he shouted at Cindy, "You'll make a baba out of a boy. Robert, he's little. He's only 2 years old." The mother tried to protect her son, hiding him behind her back. "Orders are not discussed in this house. Don't forget your place. Are we in the barracks? What's with the big mouth? You should just respect your husband and do what he says and keep quiet. And you're right on the mark." The man angrily clenched his fists. Cindy walked away, taking her son out of his father's voice. She feared Robert like fire. And with Peter, she felt very safe. She felt safe. "How's work going?" she asked Peter. "All week you've been walking around like you're in the water. Today you were smiling. Things are looking up. The rat's been caught, cornered, so to speak." "Nice smile, Cindy. But don't forget, if you corner a rat, it can bite." In defense of himself, "It's not easier to let it go so it won't be a problem later." "It won't bite," Peter assured her. Suddenly, the man's cell phone rang, and he went into his office, apologizing. And Cindy smiled as she watched her son fiddling with the constructor. Suddenly, she heard a familiar name. "Why did Payne call you again? What did he want this time?" "No, Don't agree to anything. You don't go to the casino with him anymore. Don't you get it? You've made a mess of things. I know. You got any other errands to run? When Peter finished talking and walked back into the living room, he noticed Cindy's frightened look. He immediately asked what happened. I'm sorry. It's just that you were talking so loudly that I couldn't help but hear everything. Who's Payne? Yeah, he's a local gangster. He's the one my rat was feeding all the information to. He's the reason I'm having all this trouble at the company. Frank jumped into the room to pack up her things. Cindy, grabbing her son's hand. We're leaving. Cindy, what the hell are you? What fly bit you? Not understanding anything. Peter sighed heavily and followed her. Can you explain what it was that scared you so much with the name Payne? He asked, entering the room. It was the first time the man had ever seen tears fall in hail. It always seemed, when it was shown in movies, that it was a montage, that they couldn't last like that. Tears one after another. But looking at this woman now, Peter realized they could. And if I don't get out of your house, you're going to have problems not only at work, but in your personal life, Cindy was saying. He took her by the shoulders or Racer shook her. You can explain to me in a normal way. There are enough mysteries at work. The woman took more air into her lungs, as before jumping into the water, and blurted out, Robert Payne, my husband. He's the one I'm hiding from. He's the one who, drunk with his friends, abused me. Mostly him, of course. One of his friends, I cracked a baseball over his head and punched it. And the other one held me down while my husband had fun. All because I refused to have a drink with them. That was the last straw. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. And now he's looking for me. And I'm afraid to think what he'll do when he finds me. Peter was shocked beyond words. Not only was this thug her husband, but he was allowing himself this kind of behavior. Now we can go, Cindy asked, looking carefully at the owner of the house. No, he answered, thinking about something else. Where will you go? You haven't found an apartment. It's all right to stay in a hotel for a couple of days, and then we'll figure something out. No, inn. I'm not letting you go anywhere now. I'm not afraid of your pain. The woman shook her head in vain. He's a terrible man, ruthless and unscrupulous. How did you end up with him? I told you that he is very persistent and always gets his way. That's how I got caught up in it. Let's just say, what makes you think he's looking for you? I called a friend the other day, and she told me, you shouldn't have. I wouldn't call anyone else. He can track you down on your cell phone in a heartbeat. You should change your SIM card. Now let's stop scaring the kid, have dinner, and go to bed. There's a reason they say the morning is the morning. Peter, I'm very afraid of dragging you into a fight with that monster. And I'm not 15. I am a grown man, and I will solve all my own problems. The woman smiled and decided to stay at his house. It was already 10 p.m. when Frank finally got to play, run, and bathe. Just then, Peter, the son, fell asleep. We sat in the dining room and had ice cream. Tell me, what does your husband do? Peter asked. He didn't like me to take an interest in his business. Cindy replied. You don't have to get into my business, he told me. The less you know, the better you sleep. I stayed out of it, but I'd heard that his computer company was going through a rough patch. I know he's been stealing cars and changing license plates. He's had men come to him with faces like that. It's scary to remember. I always tried to stay out of their sight. And Robert would make his specialty coffees for the guests. And I was shaking. I tried to put everything on the table and run away. They were always arguing, settling their relations in the worst kind of language. The child and I would go to the back rooms so my son wouldn't hear this outrage. I'm sorry I asked you to tell me. Guiltily, Peter said. Memories are difficult. I can see that you're not very comfortable. She answered him nothing, continued. The last time, some strange young guys came, quite handsome. I even thought, well, this time there will be no swearing, and the negotiations would go quietly. But no, I hoped for nothing. One of them caught me by the arm and sat me on his lap. Robert jumped up and hit me. "What are you doing backing up in front of men? Get out of here." I didn't want to deal with them, and I wanted to leave. But one guy said, "Cindy, why don't you come with us? Don't touch me. Guests in other people's houses don't behave like that." I yelled. He started, pulled me against him, and I fumbled for a base, smacked him over the head. The second one grabbed me, yanked my dress by the crack. And that's when Robert decided to show all his masculine strength. I stared into his wild eyes, and I was scared, not because he might raise his hand to me again, but because for the first time in my life, I had decided to cross what Robert thought was a red line. I decided to go against his will, to rebel without fear of his fists. Mom always idolized Dad, saying he was king and God to her. And she taught me to live the same way. "You should always shut your mouth in time," Mom taught me. Then the family would be good. My mother wouldn't understand me now, and I can't accept such a Robert, despite the fact that he is the father of my child. She was silent, and her tears prevented her from speaking, but there was nothing more to say. In the morning, while my husband clung to me, I packed my suitcases with my children's things and left. I left this house, which for a long time had been a fortress and a golden cage at the same time. And you know, I don't regret it. Robert was never good, and the overbearing nature of his parents left a mark on the man's entire life. He always wanted to prove himself strong, self-sufficient, all-powerful, and assert himself as best he could. I tried not to bend under his pressure, but I was afraid for my life and the baby's life. "Are you going to divorce them?" Peter asked. "Of course." "Then what are you waiting for? Write a statement. I'll take you to court. You have a minor, Frank, so you'll have to go through this unpleasant procedure. The doctor who took you to the hospital. Remember, he took all the beatings, wrote a report that you needed surgery after your husband's game. So that's what we're taking to the police." "Peter, are you crazy? Is he gonna kill me?" "No, I'll just divorce him. Then he'll really kill you. And then he'll look like that. But why is my husband not like you? Kind, sensitive, loving children." Cindy looked at him with a kind of adoration. "I am far from white and fluffy, and never have been. I can be rude, demanding, and even mean. And if a person is a jerk like your husband or Chris, I will always find the strength to tell them to their face. So don't idealize me. Everything I do for you and Frank, I do purely by choice, and no one would make me do it against my will. I am far from a noble knight. I'm like any man, I have my faults. But it's fair to say that I would never raise my hand to a woman or hurt a child. And you're a good mother. You have a maternal warmth about you. What attracts you to Frank? And it's wonderful. You got a night to think about it. There are two options. One, you change your life, and we go to court and the police. The second is you look for an apartment and shake every knock, expecting your husband to visit any day now. Make up your mind. The time was late. We had to say good night to each other and go to our rooms. And the next day was Saturday. Peter was in no hurry to get anywhere, so breakfast was delayed. The first question he asked his guest was, of course, about her decision and what she thought about her future life. "Peter, honestly, I was up all night, thinking about how it would have turned out if I hadn't been so. How can I put this delicately? Don't tell me. I was thinking," he added with a smile. "Well, you're making it easy for me too. Now, if I wasn't like this, how many problems could have been avoided? I've made so many mistakes, and every one of them almost fatal. Don't be so fatal when there's nothing you can do about it. And I think you have everything ahead of you. I mean, your optimism is inspiring, but I'm scared to think what's in store for me. And I can tell you, you'll have a happy life without a tyrant. Do you have a good lawyer?" "No," I shook my head. "There are no lawyers among my acquaintances, but that's easily remedied. The doctor you know, Sam, has a brother-in-law who's a very good lawyer. We'll go to him." "Oh my God, how much trouble are we in?" "It's just one mistake. When I agreed to sign with him, I remember his every word, how he skillfully persuaded, insisted. I held out for a year, dragging it out, saying it was a serious step. I had to think about it. But on the day of my son's birthday, he finally persuaded me. He promised a lot, as always, but I needed absolutely nothing of what he tried to give me. I told him, "Remember, if you raise your hand against me, you're hitting your son." He agreed. And indeed, for 6 months or more, I was the happiest woman I'd ever been. But then my wishes stopped counting. He reminded me that he was in charge, and his wishes were the law. What he wants, that's how it should be. And everything else is dust. Robert, God is king. It's become an unspoken law in our family. He's older and therefore more experienced, so he'll decide everything himself. That's how my happiness ended. If I hadn't done that stupid thing, how much easier would it be now? But we don't take the easy way out. We have to fight for everything. The sweeter the victory. Your gullibility is both bribing and angering, Peter said. If you didn't know him, that's one thing. But he's already shown his hands and his despotism. And you still believed him. Yes, I say, I'm already stupid. I remembered the difficult times and tried to realize what I had achieved by the time I was almost 30. An oppressive husband, a failed marriage, no job, no career, no home, no money, nothing. So much for marital bliss. Only one joy as a son. But that's a lot too. She comforted herself. Cindy, I love you. I tried to be gentle with you. Robert. God, what kind of a lie was that, given the constant humiliation and yelling? Do the women you love get beaten? Do the ones you love get humiliated? No, no, no. She no longer entertained the hope that maybe someday she'd be better and appreciated. That's it. Hope was dead. Her illusions of marital bliss gone up in smoke. Cindy wanted to give him her life, but she's left with a broken trough. Her marriage was a total failure. That much was now certain. Normally, Cindy didn't use profanity and judge the fox when she could perform a 3-story map before she could close her mouth. But now she was so shattered by her totals that she mentally allowed herself to lose control. Peter, wasting no time, called Sam and asked about Martin. Sam, we need your Martin. I had been waiting for that call. Because after Cindy's been at my place, you can't forgive that. I'll tell him. He'll call you. But Robert didn't waste any time. He called up everyone he knew who knew Cindy in any way, but he couldn't make any headway in his search. The only Lisa had been to his house twice, and not just his house. Now she was calling him, whispering into the phone that she missed him. She was looser and more experienced than Cindy. Well, Robert didn't like Velcro, so when he saw that Lisa was calling, he just didn't pick up the phone. He didn't know who else to involve in the search for his wife. It had been 2 weeks since she and her son had been away from home, and the news came from where he wasn't expecting it. David's day, the head of traffic safety, began again with a disappointing report. Another traffic accident, and again a fatality. On the table were reports on accidents and traffic violations committed by drivers, and analyzing the reasons for their occurrence, there were videotapes from 2 weeks ago. I decided to start with the tapes, but I got distracted by a phone call. Good morning, David. He recognized his old friend Payne. He didn't like to talk to him much, but he had to talk to him. He was helping after all. So with a friendly tone of voice, he replied, Good to hear, Robert. Okay, let's get right to it. Knowing how busy you are, my wife disappeared 2 weeks ago. Neighbors saw her leaving with a baby and a huge suitcase. Didn't leave town in any form of transportation. Is there any way you can track her movements? Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to keep track of where she's been all over town or something? David was pissed off at everyone, even though he knew the guy was innocent. Why all over town? You know my address. Look around. Maybe you'll see something interesting. It's good when you say it's been missing for 2 weeks. Yeah, you guys have a lot of traffic accidents there. 2 in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I've heard that, Robert replied. So you might be able to help. I can't promise anything. But if there's anything interesting, I'll call the number I still remember. Thanks. I'll be waiting. Exactly, of course. I didn't realize Robert was getting too close just 2 weeks after Cindy and her son hadn't been home. He was crashing and turning. He was angry with his wife, wanting to find and punish her for everything she had done. On the other hand, he marveled at her courage. Never would Mr. Payne have thought that he would long for a wife and a son. The house was uncomfortable and cold without them. He feared that she had not just left him, but had gone to someone. Could she have decided to do that? He was afraid to answer that question for himself. He was afraid that she would ask for a divorce, which of course he would not give her. Afraid to know the truth, where and with whom his Cindy was. But despite all the anger he bought into himself, he had to admit that he missed Cindy. He missed her as a woman. She hadn't broken down, hadn't been afraid. She was worth respecting for that. Thought Robert at himself for thinking such thoughts. Just what she'd been missing. How dare she leave him? And with a child. He had no answers to those questions. Robert had lived with this woman for 7 years, and no matter how bad things got between them, he had grown accustomed to her and loved her. Yeah, sometimes he skipped out. What kind of man doesn't? A man's cheating is different. It's different from a woman's. It's the way God made men. There's nothing you can do about it. His face was twisted with anger, and he didn't know what he'd do to her if she were here right now. He wasn't the perfect husband. Hurt her. That's true. But why leave? And then they called relationships out of the family. It's always both of us. His family and his parents' relationship was right in front of me. His father always hit his mother in front of little Robert. He remembered how she preferred it when her husband chased her around the room. Don't, calm down. Yes, it was terrible. The mother was pitiful, and he would stick up for her. But she wouldn't go anywhere, and she wouldn't take him away from his father. And when his father died, his mother didn't cry. She just stood there and stared blankly. Cry, the neighbors would say to her, but she would look at them and answer, I cried all my tears already when he beat me. There was nothing left. The women nodded understandingly and put their arms around her shoulders. Mother did not live long, but even the little that the Lord had given her, she walked with a smile and did not look back with fear. Those were probably the best years of her life. And his wife, what did she miss? A full house, a beautiful son. I don't understand these women, Robert thought. Lying on the couch, he'd let his business slip a little, missed calls from his partners. Cindy was on his mind. And Monday night, he got a persistent call from someone. He didn't want to pick up the phone, but they wanted to talk to him on the other end of the line. Yes, Robert barked. Robert. Well, to whom do I have the honor of speaking? I'm your wife Cindy's attorney. I'll be representing her in divorce court. My name is Martin. I've prepared the divorce and property division papers. You'll need to review them, consult with your attorney, and give me an answer. The terms are more than good. Your spouse is not out to rob you. Robert jumped up off the couch immediately. This was a very famous lawyer in town. Where did my wife get the money to pay for your services? That's all you're interested in. There are no questions on other positions. The lawyer asked in surprise. Where is my wife? I have to talk to her first. I'm not authorized to give you the address of her whereabouts. If she finds it necessary, she will contact you herself. Good day to you. She's filed for divorce after all, Robert thought. He dialed her number, but immediately turned off the phone with anger. She changed her SATAM card. Martin arrived at their house on Sunday night. Peter went for a walk with Frank. Cindy spent a long time talking things over with the lawyer. It was a man about 50 years old, gray-haired, with a very soft, beautiful voice, disposing to frank conversation. In a couple hours, she laid out to him all the reasons why she didn't want to see her husband anymore. I hate him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to live in the same house with him. I despise him as a man, and I want nothing to do with that man. I want him to sign the papers and give me a divorce. I'd like to part with him in a good way. Maybe you should think about it. You have a child, a boy. He needs a father. And if his father disgusts me, shouldn't the child see happy parents? He'll only learn to beat women and hate his father. I won't stop them seeing each other, but I won't live under the same roof with him. You're a determined woman, and you're certainly cruel to your husband. Every word you say is a sharp knife. If he heard you, he would be hurt and offended, Martin said. Nothing for his cheating and abusive behavior. He deserved it. I lived with that monster for 7 years. He broke all my wings. I'm a miserable woman. Cindy confessed to the lawyer and cried. Only my son was a ray of light in a dark kingdom. Only by looking at him could I live in his father's house. But recent events have put an end to our family relationship once and for all. The limit of my patience is exhausted. I want a divorce, and he has the right to live as he wants and with whom he wants. He's always had plenty of women. He's never had enough of me alone. Martin looked at Cindy in her sad eyes and added, "Everything will be as you want it to be. Don't worry." Every day, Robert waited for the lawyer to call. But on Tuesday, it wasn't the lawyer who called him. It was David. "Robert, come over. I have an interesting movie for you." Tortured and whistling. His son tanked. Robert was in such a hurry that he literally flew to meet David. He ran into the office and, forgetting to say hello, immediately asked, "Did you find her? Now you'll look and tell me yourself." But a large suitcase and a little boy is present. "That's her," said the man with the abnormally shiny eyes. "Robert, sit down, calm down. Otherwise I won't show you anything. There's a sip of water." Robert took a deep breath and drank some water, and indeed he felt better. "What's up? You've come to your senses." "Yeah, sorry." "Watch him," and he turned the monitor screen toward him, staring intently at what was happening on the screen. Robert, of course, recognized Cindy immediately, but when she fell in the middle of the road, he flinched. "What's wrong with her?" he asked David. "How should I know? Look, the traffic's backed up." A young man got out of a car, lifted Cindy in his arms, and carried her into the cabin. Then he took the suitcase, put it in the trunk, and put Frank in the back seat. He slammed the door shut and drove away. Robert sat there unable to say a word. Where was he taking her? Well, to the hospital. I think there are 2 clinics down that road. Wouldn't be hard for you to find out if she's there or not. Well, the license plate number on the Savior's car is Peter. He owns his own Ford X, and this is his address and his library if she wants to come back to you. She's my wife, and she should live where her husband lives. I agree. Only I guess she doesn't see it that way. She hasn't come back yet. David grinned. Yeah, maybe she's just unconscious in the hospital. But she's got the papers on her. Of course. And the baby would have been returned to you by now. The police would have found you long ago, no doubt about it. Robert was sad, but he remembered to say thank you. I owe you one. You want to settle up with money? No, I don't need money. If there's a problem, I'll come to you. Okay, we've got the clinic where Cindy was a week ago. He found it right away. Sam, the head doctor, was called in. Hello, Robert said, smiling sweetly. He obviously wanted to please the doctor. Petrov immediately realized who was in front of him. What can I do for you? You had Cindy a while ago. Yes, I remember. But who are you and what are you interested in? Robert was transformed. The doctor was clearly in the mood for conversation. I'm her husband, Robert Payne. I'm interested in what happened to her and where she is now. Well, where she is now, I don't know, the doctor replied. Because I'm a doctor, not a policeman. What happened to her? You tell me yourself, and I'll be glad to listen to you. I have nothing to tell you except that she ran away from me 2 weeks ago with the baby. That's all. Well, what else do you want me to tell you? Like how many people raped her? Robert looked startled at the doctor. What are you talking about? I don't understand you. She had multiple lacerations. She was swallowed, picked up piece by piece. All the beatings were removed. Every bruise was recorded and a doctor's report on the woman's condition after the operation was written. I advised her to go to the police with these documents. I think they'll be interested in you. Any other questions for me? No, thank you, Doctor, Robert said. And the doctor left without saying goodbye. This was a turn of events Payne never expected. On his way out of the clinic, he called his friend at the police station. William, it's me. They say I've been reported. Yeah, yesterday. Why didn't you call me? You know, here's the thing. I only had it in my hands for 2 hours, and they took it to the DA's office. There's some very serious paperwork in there. The doctor's report is written according to all the rules. There's nothing to fault. Every bruise you gave her is photographed. It's over, Robert. I mean, it means you've got some very serious people behind your wife's back, and you're looking at 8 or more for spousal rape. Do you have anyone in the DA's office? No, but even if I did, I wouldn't be asking for that kind of a charge. My advice to you is get your wife to lay down. Apologize. And if she takes the plea, consider yourself lucky. And William, without saying goodbye, hung up the phone. Obviously, it doesn't help. Peter can't forgive me for trying to ruin him. Well, I'm not proud. The man calmed himself down. I can lie on my feet, but I won't give you a divorce. With these thoughts, he went to the address to Peter. Having called, he waited for the guard to open the gate. But the gate did not open, only a small intercom window. Who do you want? I need Cindy and my son Frank. We don't have any. This is Peter's house, and he hasn't had visitors in a while. Robert's nerves were frayed. Open up. He shouted and pounded his fist on the powerful gate. But the guard didn't even flinch, just slammed the window shut, and the other Franks really weren't in the house. Peter had moved them into his one-room city apartment, which had been empty since he moved out of town. That's what the lawyer advised. It's wrong for you to hide it in your house. Could there be trouble? Move her into your apartment, and if they ask you, tell them you're renting. I'd even draw up a contract and put a price on it. You don't have to take any money, but it's the right thing to do. Peter did as Martin advised. Robert did not want to leave Peter's house, where he thought his wife and child were hidden. He waited until evening, but the homeowner arrived home alone. No one else came out of the house. Maybe she really isn't here. Then where is it? Where should I go to look for them? I must definitely talk to Cindy. I'm sure I can convince her to take a statement. That's what Robert thought as he drove up to the house. He had been out of the office all day again, ignoring calls from work. All his thoughts were on his wife and child. All week he had been driving to Peter's house, but all to no avail. If I don't find him by Monday, I'll hire a private investigator. He had more experience and more time. Robert partly understood his wife. He'd wronged her more than once, raised his hand against her, and she decided to take revenge, to punish him for all his tears. With this, she tried to dull her pain, tearing her from the inside. He can, of course, ask for forgiveness, even give himself and her the word to forgive. But he's not sure he can change his behavior. It's the way he's used to living, the way his father lived. This is how the neighbors lived. He did not say it was right, but seeing it from childhood, he could not change himself. After giving birth, his wife blossomed, became seductive. All the men who came to visit him looked back at her, and she got it. He was driving along the central street of the city and thought about how to correct the situation. One day, standing in front of a traffic light, he looked around bored and suddenly saw his Cindy son. In the company of Peter, how to get out of the car, he didn't know he was being followed by a huge tail, and everyone was honking. He immediately turned the corner and jumped out of the car, trying not to lose sight of them. Seeing the benefit to his throat, a lump came up. The fuses blew all at once, and it was impossible to restrain himself. They looked like family. Not a thought in my head, only rage, anger, spite, which were bad counselors. He couldn't feel his own body. It was as if it had atrophied. With difficulty, he pulled himself together, ran across the road, and followed them into the mall. He didn't find them right away. They were sitting in a cafe drinking tea. Frank Luck had a cake. "Hello, son. Daddy shouted. The child ran up to him with his arms spread apart and immediately stood up. She was afraid he would carry him away. But Robert was not going to make her angry. On the contrary, he wanted to show with all his appearance that he wished no harm. "Hello, Cindy. I've been looking for you. I missed you so much. We need to talk. And I'm not going anywhere with you. Okay, let's sit here at the table and talk quietly." Peter didn't interfere as long as Robert behaved appropriately. He realized that they would have to talk sooner or later. "Cindy, are you two socializing here? Frank and I are going to go to the game room." "Okay, just not for long," the woman asked. During these 2 weeks, her husband had become a complete stranger to her. She didn't even want to look in his direction. "How are you feeling?" "Involved?" Robert asked. "You make it sound like you're mocking me. And you'll forgive me if I'm overreacting. But to be perfectly honest, I don't remember much from that night." "That doesn't excuse you, Robert, and I'm not going to forgive you. I almost died after your games, and I can't stand to see you." Robert could hardly contain himself. He never let anyone talk to him like that. Men were afraid of him. "The girls looked at me with adoration, and my wife couldn't find a word to say. I filed for divorce, and this time it's serious. I'm not backing down. How are you going to live? Is this the one you're hoping for?" And he nodded at Peter. "I've never relied on anyone, only on myself. And if you remember, I was working and making a good living. I'm going back to the fashion house. And Frank will go to kindergarten like all the other kids. We'll manage. You shouldn't do this forever. I love you. That's a strange kind of love, Robert. You hit me hard. You don't let me leave the house. You don't let me talk to my girlfriends. You don't let me go to work. You're not confused. It's definitely called love. Love, Cindy, is different. Cindy, no one said living with me would be easy and simple. It's easy to love when things are good. You try to keep your feelings alive when the family's a mess. Forgiveness is hard. But if you want to keep your family together," she didn't let him finish. "I have no desire at all. When I think of your fists, my whole body hurts. I have heard a lot that the key to family happiness is to accept a man as he is and not to try to subjugate him to suit your whims. It's hard, but you've never been able to do that. And most importantly, you don't want to. So let's end this conversation. You'll work it out with my lawyer. You don't need money for a lawyer. I can handle it. What did Peter promise to help you with?" "Peter saved us from dying. No one stopped for a car, but he came out and helped. So you should be thanking him, not bankrupting his firm. You complained." "No, I was just comparing the facts. But if you've made up your mind, and I can't seem to talk you into it, then I have a condition. I'll give you a divorce and agree to everything your lawyer suggests if you take a statement from the police. And if I don't, then this divorce will take years. It won't. You'll go to jail, and I'll move forward with you, without you wanting to." She was just getting up to leave when he roughly yanked her arm, settling her back in her chair. "You will do as I tell you. Are you really gonna let a kid have a black spot on his record? I mean, any decent organization would have to have a father and a mother. You don't care how they look at your son. I don't think he'll thank you for it." Cindy thought for a minute. "So I'm going to go to the child and quietly consider your proposal. How do I get in touch with you?" "Your lawyer will contact you. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Cindy. I'm not so easy to get rid of. You know that." "Oh, I don't need to be reminded of that." And she ran to the second floor to find Frank and Peter. "Where's Daddy?" the boy asked at once, seeing only his mom. "He went to work, and when we go home." Cindy looked at Peter for support, but he preferred not to interfere in family matters. "You'll have to decide that for yourself," Peter replied to her pleading look. "Do you miss Daddy, son?" "Yes." And she didn't know what the right thing to do was, deciding not to do it herself. She called Martin. "I'd like to consult with you." "Oh, all right. But let's not do it over the phone. I'll come over." After her meeting with Robert, she began to have second thoughts. She kept coming back to the life she'd led with her almost ex-husband. And the more she thought about it, the more panic set in. What would her son say to her when he grew up? Why did you deprive me of my father? What will she say to him? Will she tell him how he beat her, or worse, raped her? She would start pacing around the apartment, rubbing her temples with trembling hands. A child misses her father. Does she have the right to put him away for a long time? A very long time. What about Frank? He'll ask her again when they go home to Daddy. Everything was so easy before this meeting. But after talking to Robert, there were more questions. Her insides twisted. Just think of Robert's satisfied face and the smug look he cast at his rebellious wife. Well, she could handle it, because she wasn't alone. The main thing is that she had the strength to leave. Otherwise, she would have just lost herself. Anything can happen in life. You can lose everything in one moment, but losing yourself is the worst. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I've been thinking. I can't see my happiness as a spoiled little girl with a rich husband. How scary it is to have everything and not feel happy. She was willing to give up a semblance of that happiness for a little apartment, to be able to work and be near her son, or maybe to hell with those thoughts. And she tried to push them away. Tired of them, glancing at her watch, she waited for the lawyer. The doorbell didn't ring until 2 hours later. Sorry, Cindy was delayed by terrible traffic. Oh, please. Thank you for coming. I was really looking forward to it. Now I can't take a step without your advice. Calm down and tell me. He realized from her frightened eyes that Robert had found her and was probably intimidating her. How did he find you? How did you know? Cindy was surprised. I guessed from your condition. I don't know. We were at the mall with Frank and Peter, and suddenly he came up. He was trying to be very nice and peaceful. But I was the only one who saw something in his eyes that others didn't. He was looking at me from the side, like a beast. Anger, hatred, rage. These were the feelings that were destroying him. He said to take the statement from the police, and then he'd go along with all our terms. And if I didn't, he'd make the divorce last for years. He's bluffing. If you don't take the application, he'll get time served and you'll deal with him quietly. That's what I told him too, but he scared me that it would be a black spot in Frank's bio. Dad's an ex-con, and he might not be able to get a good job. And then Frank threw himself into his arms. And now he's asking me when we're going home to Dad. I'm so confused. I don't know what to do, Martin. Whatever we decide, that's what we do. Don't take anything. You have to burn your bridges right away, so you don't want to go back. You of all people know this man. Should you show him you have doubts? Or worse, are you afraid? He's not gonna let you live. That's not what I'm worried about. In court, how will you provide for your son? No job, no place to live. Those arguments are all against you, so only the father can raise him. He's got great facilities, money. It turns out he's an eligible groom, mansion business, good looks. It's all in his favor. The court might give him a reprieve. What am I supposed to do? Get a job at Frank's daycare center right away. The apartment will be rented for now, but it's there. Otherwise, there will be problems. If there's trouble with the kindergarten, I'll help. Okay, I'll call work tomorrow. I don't think it'll be a problem. He's tired today. He had another difficult case that was nearing completion. But it was a lot of sweat. That's why Martin felt like a squeezed lemon. You're tired, Martin. Let me buy you some borscht. Frank praised me today. He did. Well, then I agree. The lawyer left them an hour later, leaving Cindy to ponder. She called the fashion house in the morning, but unfortunately they were staffed and she was turned down. It was a blow. She couldn't believe that where she had been working for several years, there was no room for her. It was morning on the clock, and she no longer had any energy. It was as if she was being forced to unload railcars. The fact that she was not hired ruined her already bad mood. So she decided to call the model home again. Nicole, it's me again. Sorry to interrupt. But maybe you know who needs a model. Inushka. I really don't know. You're a good worker. I'm sorry to turn you down, but I can't just fire someone for your past performance. It took you a long time to get ready, and I'm sorry. And she hung up. Cindy cried, and covering her eyes with the palms of her hands, collapsed on the couch. She felt cornered. Nothing was working out for her. It was painful, hurtful, and she thought it was unfair. What are you so snotty about? Suddenly, an inner voice made itself known. Is now the time to feel sorry for yourself? You're a modeler designer. Pull yourself together. Take your laptop and search, search, search. She jumped up. Frank stood beside her and also flapped his nose. Mommy, why are you crying so loudly? You were scared. I'm sorry, sweetheart, and so remembered something sad. She wiped her tears and picked up her hair, as if someone could see her. I opened the laptop, despite her hysterics, despite her resentment that she wasn't getting anywhere. After sitting at the laptop for 2 hours, she found a job opening at a garment factory and called there right away. Yes, we need a fashion designer. Work experience is there. To answer, and there was nothing. I graduated from college as a fashion designer. I have my own designs. How many years ago was that? Maybe I'd better come. I see. No experience. I graduated from college about 10 years ago. Cindy didn't bother to specify how many years had actually passed because the woman was right. She had nothing. Career had passed her by and no family. Young lady, are you still here? Asked on the other end of the phone. Yes, answered Cindy. Come back tomorrow morning by 9 a.m. and bring your work. She wasn't hoping for anything, not even a penny like that. The administration wanted someone with experience. The morning collected Frank at 9:00 sharp. They were standing at the gatehouse. Cindy had a pass in her name, and she entered the factory. The woman she had talked to yesterday was a petite brunette of very pleasant appearance. Who's that mommy's ponytail? She addressed the child. I'm not a ponytail. I'm Frank. And you will go to work with him too. More strictly? The woman asked. No, not at all. I'm still in quarantine in the kindergarten, but soon I'll open for children to visit. Well, let's see your work, and the head of the experimental shop wants to talk to you. It's our main shop. It's where we develop new models of future clothes. There we have modelers, designers, technologists who make samples of models. Adriana finished her story. That was the name of this woman, opened a large folder with models. She looked at Cindy. The models are old. We decided about 5 years ago to make newer ideas. There are ideas. I just haven't had time to put them into practice, Cindy said curtly. Adriana took her to the foreman. Sam, here is Cindy, the new girl. I told you about her yesterday. Are you going to talk to her? I'd like to. In front of her stood a young man, blonde, blue eyes, dimples on his chin. He was a little taller than Cindy. Come in, he invited, letting her into the office. They talked for about half an hour, and the boss agreed to take her on a 1-month probationary period. Our team is young, not afraid to put forward bold ideas, so we keep up with the times. I will be glad if you live and will benefit our factory. I'll do my best, Cindy assured him. Well then, tomorrow to the personnel department and get to work. For a month now, Cindy had been working at the factory. She liked the work. It wasn't her job to design models, of course. She seemed to be doing pretty well, though. Frank went to a private kindergarten a stone's throw from home. We rarely saw Peter, mostly phone calls. A few times she was called in for interviews with investigators, and Martin accompanied his clientele. He was so experienced, never gave his charges a hard time. Investigators sometimes got lost talking to her. And a month later, Nicole called. And you got a job. Yes, I'm working as a fashion designer. A designer. Why do you ask? Why don't you come back to us? Close to getting fired. She came in a week ago drunk, and we didn't see her on the runway. But she fell down. It was a scandal, and yours was in the front row, watching. Are they with Olivian? Didn't you know? No. I don't care. We're getting divorced. So are you coming to work? No, I'm afraid to quit. What if you forgive her and I have to leave? And no one will hire me here anymore. No, don't worry. The director doesn't take such people back, although she's not a bad girl, but absolutely no breaks. We're expecting you tomorrow. The feeling was twofold. On the one hand, she was glad that she would be doing what she liked, and on the other, uncomfortable. She had just begun to work in front of Anton Mitrievich, and Robert would be after her again. But she also wanted to return to her old job. She felt herself in her place there, and her earnings allowed her to live without counting a penny. Well, we can't keep you, can we? I can only wish you all the best, said the foreman, and they said goodbye. In the morning, Cindy was in a good mood. Things will get better now, thought the young woman. They were in a hurry with their son to work. He to kindergarten and Cindy to the fashion house. Sitting on the bus and watching what was happening outside the window, she smiled. She was distracted from her pleasant thoughts by a phone call. It was Peter. Good morning. Hi. I'm on my way to work at the fashion house. Can you believe it? Or fired for misconduct. She heard Peter laughing. Why are you laughing? You get fired for that. So she came to work drunk, Cindy said. Did you think carefully before you gave your consent? That's exactly what you're implying right now. Of course I thought about it. So what am I supposed to do now? Not live, hide, go to a job I don't like. Is that what you're offering me? I'm suggesting that you think twice before you make a move. You're responsible for the baby. And he hung up. Peter yelled, apparently so loudly that the passengers looked back at her, but there was only a dial tone in response. She got there quickly. With a sinking heart, Cindy opened the familiar door and walked into the lobby, where she was enveloped by such a familiar smell. The guard said hello and smiled, which means they haven't forgotten. The girls climb into hugs and try to touch her. Cindy looks away embarrassed, clutching her bag. She was in her element, approaching the principal's office, and she bumped into Lisa. The latter was in tears and looked at Cindy like an enemy of the people. I waited. If I hadn't snapped, you wouldn't be in this place. Quietly. You're a mean one. Robert brought you up right. She put a man like you in jail by slamming his nose in your face. My friend's on her way out. What she just said. That's the kind of man Robert put away. Did they take him into custody? And that's when she dialed her lawyer. Martin, how's it going with Robert? What about him? He's in lockup where he belongs. Unless, of course, you're going to withdraw your statement, you can look for another lawyer right away. I don't work with kamikazes. No. I'm just finding that out. I'm just finding out now. That's why I called you to check. I'm working at the fashion house again as of today. I was afraid Robert would come after me. But no, don't be. You can work in peace. Even though he knew someone in the prosecutor's office, they couldn't help him. Even though your Robert tried very hard. He's a mute and never will be again. I like your attitude after talking to the lawyer. Your mood has lifted to the mark. And life is good, and living well inside has become peaceful. Now she can live without looking back. And that's wonderful. Her life began to change the minute she was free from Robert. This was the relief she had dreamed of for all 6 years. Robert, no longer her problem. She finally walked into the principal's office. Nothing had changed here. Unless you count Lisa, Kate had gotten a little slimmer over the years. She had a second chin, but she was still dressed smartly and tastefully. Cindy walked forward a little. Kate, pink lips, stretched smile. She is clearly pleased to see Cindy here again. Pleased with you, she starts the conversation first. There's a lot of work to do, and looks her over from head to toe. And then she says, you're in great shape, Cindy. Well, you always have been. Yeah, I'm glad to be back in the fold. So, shall we sign the contract? Are you ready? I'm ready. She went in for a few more interrogations. She had to see Robert, but she had a lawyer by her side, and she felt very confident. At the trial, Mr. Payne behaved abominably. He kept trying to accuse Cindy of cheating on him. She's even living in his apartment now, although she's still my wife. Your Honor, the defense attorney was throwing himself into the fray. She rents this apartment. Here's the contract and the receipts. But it's the same apartment, the judge clarified. But she has the right to rent any apartment, especially since it's cheaper. She lived in his house while I was looking for her all over the city, shouted Robert throughout the hall. She wasn't just living. She was between life and death. And as soon as she got better, Cindy left and has been living on her own for a long time after being beaten for all of 6+ years. It's a wonder she didn't become disabled. The lawyer finished his speech. Robert Payne had 2 attorneys, and they worked their asses off. The trial was postponed 3 times at the request of the accused party, and they even managed to reduce the sentence by 3 years. The sentence was read for about an hour, and Payne received 9 years in a maximum security penal colony. Cindy breathed in the air of freedom, and her heart missed Peter. But that's another story altogether.